The first thing I noticed was the smell, a dark, expensive cologne hanging in the entryway of my own house, cedar and black pepper and something almost medicinal, the kind of scent that announced a man before he entered a room. I stopped with my key still in the lock and listened. Rain ticked softly against the windows, the refrigerator hummed in the kitchen, and somewhere above me a floorboard gave a slow, deliberate creak. My wife, Claire, was supposed to be 40 minutes away at her sister's house in Bellevue. I was supposed to be in court until 5. Instead, a witness had failed to appear, the judge had recessed early, and at 2:17 on a gray Thursday afternoon in Seattle, I stood inside my front door wondering why my house smelled like a man I had never met. Then I saw the shoes. They were tucked beside the narrow walnut bench where I normally left my briefcase, polished brown leather, size 11 or 12, damp around the soles. Not mine. Claire sometimes had contractors or delivery people at the house, but contractors did not leave $600 Italian loafers beside the door. I closed it quietly behind me and set my briefcase down without letting the brass clasp snap. There was a half-empty glass of bourbon on the kitchen island. We kept that bottle for guests, a 12-year Macallan Claire claimed tasted like burned furniture polish. Beside it sat another glass with a faint coral lipstick mark on the rim. The faucet was dripping. A man's charcoal gray jacket had been thrown over one of the dining chairs, and on the floor near the bottom stair lay a pale blue necktie twisted into a loose knot. Each object felt less like evidence than an instruction. Look here. Keep going. Learn exactly how little they feared you. I picked up the tie by its narrow end. The label read Canali, and the silk was still warm from the house. I wish I could tell you I felt rage immediately, because rage would have been easier. What I felt was a violent emptiness, as if every organ inside my chest had dropped several inches at once. My fingers went cold. My mouth filled with a sour metallic taste, and although I had cross-examined murder witnesses without losing my voice, I had to remind myself to breathe in my own hallway. Another creak came from above, followed by a muffled laugh. Claire's laugh. Not the polite one she used at charity dinners or the bright, automatic one she gave clients. This was low and breathless, the laugh I remembered from hotel rooms during the first years of our marriage. Now, I want you to imagine standing there for a moment. Not finding a suspicious message you could misunderstand, not hearing a rumor you could dismiss, but following another man's belongings through the home where you had slept beside the same woman for 17 years. There is a moment when suspicion stops being an idea and becomes architecture. It is in the glass on the counter, the jacket on the chair, the shirt hanging from the banister halfway up the stairs. You can touch it. You can smell it. And still your mind begs for one impossible explanation that will let your old life survive. My name is Graham Mercer. I was 46 years old then, a civil litigation attorney with a small but respected practice near Pioneer Square. Claire was 43 and worked as a fundraising consultant for museums and nonprofit foundations. We had no children, not because we had not wanted them, but because years of appointments, procedures, and 2 miscarriages had eventually turned hope into something too painful to keep discussing. We had lived in that renovated craftsman house on Queen and for 11 years. I had personally sanded the oak banister Claire's lover had used as a rack for his shirt. I climbed the stairs slowly, avoiding the 3rd step because it squeaked near the wall. A black belt lay on the landing. One sock had been abandoned outside the guest room. The bedroom door at the end of the hall was mostly closed, but not latched, and through the narrow opening I could see the reflection of movement in the antique mirror above Claire's dresser. Her cream blouse was on the carpet. A man's bare foot appeared at the edge of the bed and disappeared again. Then I heard Claire whisper, "You have to be gone before 4. Graham never misses the Thursday partners' meeting." The man answered, then stopped looking at the clock. His voice was familiar. I could not place it immediately, and that made the betrayal feel even more intimate. He was not a stranger. I moved close enough to see his profile in the mirror when he leaned toward her, silver at his temples, a thin scar beside his left ear. Recognition arrived with the calm precision of a verdict. Nolan Price. 50 years old, managing partner of Price Urban Development, one of the biggest private real estate firms in the region. I had met him 3 times at fundraising events. Claire had introduced him as an important donor. He had shaken my hand at a waterfront gala 8 months earlier and told me I was a lucky man. My pulse pounded against my eardrum so hard that their voices became distant. Every primitive part of me wanted to kick that door open, drag him off the bed, and turn 17 years of humiliation into something physical. I had 6 inches and at least 20 pounds on him. I could already picture how easily the door would strike the wall. Then the lawyer in me spoke. It did not say forgive. It did not say remain calm. It said, if you enter that room now, they control what happens next. They can deny what was said. They can describe you as unstable. Nolan can call the police. Claire can turn one reckless minute into the only fact anyone remembers. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I stepped backward. I took out my phone, switched off the sound and vibration, and recorded 47 seconds through the opening. I captured Nolan's face in the mirror, Claire's voice saying his name, and enough of the room to make the situation unmistakable without recording anything explicit. Then I photographed the trail downstairs: sock, belt, shirt, tie, jacket, shoes, glasses. My hands shook so badly during the first photograph that I had to take it again. I returned to the entryway, picked up my briefcase, and walked out without making a sound. The rain had thickened. I sat inside my car 2 blocks away with both hands gripping the steering wheel, watching water crawl down the windshield in crooked lines. I tried to call my closest friend, Ethan, but ended the call before it connected. Speaking would have made it real. Instead, I drove back downtown and parked beneath my office. I took the elevator to the 9th floor, nodded to my receptionist, and said the hearing had ended early. She asked whether I wanted coffee. I told her yes. My voice sounded perfectly normal. That frightened me more than if I had screamed. For roughly 6 weeks before that afternoon, Claire had been changing in small ways that were easy to explain individually. She had begun taking Wednesday evening Pilates classes in South Lake Union, although her gym had no Wednesday class listed online. She bought 3 silk blouses she said were for donor meetings, started showering as soon as she came home, and became irritated whenever I asked the simplest question about her day. One Sunday morning, as we sat at the kitchen table sharing the newspaper, she received a call and carried her coffee onto the back deck despite the rain. When she returned 10 minutes later, she said her sister, Melissa, was going through another crisis. Melissa had gone through so many crises during our marriage that I accepted the explanation without asking which one. Intimacy between Claire and me had cooled too, but marriages have seasons, and ours had endured worse than a few distant months. I thought she was grieving the anniversary of our second miscarriage. I gave her space because I believed space was kindness. She used it to create another life. At my desk, I uploaded the video and photographs to an encrypted K-storage account that Claire did not know existed. Then I duplicated them onto a flash drive and locked it in the fireproof cabinet where I stored privileged client backups. I opened a blank legal pad and wrote the date, exact time, and every detail I could remember. The cologne. The bourbon. The position of the clothing. The words spoken upstairs. I did this because memory changes under stress, and I knew that soon Claire would begin trying to replace what I had seen with a version that served her. At 3:41, she texted me, still at Melissa's. She's having a rough day. Might pick up Ty on my way home. Love you. I stared at the final 2 words until the letters no longer looked like language. Then I replied, sounds good. Court wrapped early but I have paperwork. See you tonight. That was the moment the mask went on. At 6:22, Claire walked into the house carrying pad CEW and green curry from our usual restaurant. Nolan's clothing was gone. The glasses had been washed and placed in the cupboard. A candle burned near the kitchen sink, lemongrass and eucalyptus, chosen to erase whatever remained of him. She kissed my cheek and said, "You look tired." I answered, "Long day." She asked about court. I described the missing witness and the judge's irritation. She told me Melissa had fought with her boyfriend, even though Melissa had been single for 3 months. Claire delivered the lie while transferring noodles onto ceramic plates, her hands completely steady. I watched her and understood something I had never learned in 17 years, my wife was exceptionally comfortable lying to me. Did Melissa calm down? I asked. Eventually, she said. You know how dramatic she gets. Then she smiled and asked whether I wanted wine. If you have ever been betrayed, you already know discovery is not one wound. The first wound is what they did. The second is watching them return to ordinary life afterward, seeing how easily they ask about your day, touch your shoulder, or complain that the food is cold. That second wound teaches you the betrayal did not happen in a burst of madness. It required rehearsal. Claire talked for 20 minutes about a foundation board member who kept changing the seating plan for an upcoming dinner. I nodded, asked sensible questions, and forced myself to eat. When she mentioned Nolan's company as one of the event sponsors, she did not blink. Price Urban increased their table commitment, she said. Nolan can be difficult, but he's generous when his ego is involved. Have I met him? I asked. Her fork paused for less than a second. Maybe at the Maritime Museum Gala. Tall, gray hair, talks too much. Right, I said. The lucky man guy. Claire laughed. That sounds like him. She slept beside me that night. I did not. At 1:13 in the morning, she turned toward me and rested her hand against my back, a gesture so familiar that my body nearly responded to it before my mind recoiled. I lay awake listening to her breathe and began separating my emotions from my decisions. I could not represent myself in a divorce. No competent attorney should. By 7 the next morning, I had decided whom to call. Rebecca Shaw practiced family law from a converted brick building in Belltown. She was discreet, aggressive without being theatrical, and owed me a favor after I had helped save one of her corporate clients from a disastrous contract dispute. I called from my car and said, I need a consultation. Personal, confidential, and soon. Her tone changed immediately. 10:30. Use the side entrance. Rebecca watched the video once. She did not offer empty sympathy. That was one reason I trusted her. She set my phone down and said, How much does Claire know you know? Nothing. Keep it that way for now. She asked about property, accounts, debt, inheritances, and whether we had a prenuptial agreement. We did not. Washington is a community property state, but courts aim for a just and equitable distribution, not necessarily a perfect split, and adultery alone would not hand me the house or strip Claire of everything. I knew that already. What I needed was not a fantasy courtroom victory. I needed control over the timing, protection against hidden financial decisions, and a clear record of whatever Nolan and Claire had been doing. Do not empty accounts, Rebecca warned. Do not threaten either of them. Do not access anything you are not legally entitled to access. Preserve records you already share, change the passwords on your individual accounts, and assume every word you send will eventually be read aloud in court. I tell clients the same thing. Clients listen better than attorneys. That almost made me smile. She gave me a list of documents to copy and suggested a licensed investigator named Luis Ortega. Before I left, she leaned back and studied me. Graham, people in your position often say they want the truth. Usually they want one fact that will make the pain orderly. You may find 10 facts, and none of them will do that. I still need them. Then decide in advance what you will not become while looking. I remembered those words later. That weekend, I behaved like the husband Claire expected. We visited Pike Place Market on Saturday morning. She bought dahlias from the stall she liked and complained about tourists blocking the aisle. We drank coffee overlooking Elliott Bay while ferries moved through low white fog. At one point, she threaded her arm through mine, and anyone watching would have seen a stable middle-aged couple enjoying a familiar ritual. My phone contained a video that could end our marriage in under a minute. Hers kept lighting up inside her coat pocket. She checked it every time I looked away. On Sunday, I told her I would be working late several nights because a construction case had entered settlement negotiations. She touched my wrist and said, "Don't burn yourself out." I nearly admired the performance. Luis began working on Monday. He was a compact, patient man in his late 50s who had spent 23 years with the King County Sheriff's Office before becoming a private investigator. We met in a quiet diner south of downtown, and after examining Nolan's photograph, he said, "People who think they're careful are usually careful in only one environment. He may hide messages well and still park where every camera sees him." Within 8 days, Luis documented Claire and Nolan meeting 3 times. Once at a boutique hotel near Lake Union, once in Nolan's black Range Rover inside a parking structure, and once at Melissa's townhouse in Bellevue. That third location mattered. Claire had not merely used her sister as an excuse. Melissa was providing them with a place to meet. Luis photographed Nolan entering through Melissa's garage at 7:08 p.m. Claire arrived 19 minutes later. Melissa left in her own car, returned 2 hours afterward, and stood talking with Nolan outside as if his presence were completely ordinary. When Luis slid the photographs across the diner table, I felt something inside me harden. Melissa had been 21 when Claire and I married. I had helped pay for 1 semester of her graduate program when their father refused. I had reviewed the lease for her first business without charging her. She came to our house every Thanksgiving, called me her favorite reasonable person, and had looked me directly in the eye at dinner 5 days earlier while asking whether work was stressful. "How long has she known?" I asked. "Photographs can't tell us that," Luis said. But she wasn't surprised to see him. Let me pause here, because this was the point when the affair stopped feeling like one person's secret and started feeling like a room full of people had been watching me from behind glass. I could understand desire, selfishness, even cowardice. What I could not understand was the administration of it, the schedules, the borrowed townhouse, the coordinated lies, the way Melissa had turned deception into a family service. Claire was cheating. Melissa was helping her maintain the calendar. Luis discovered Nolan was married on the same afternoon. His wife's name was Evelyn Price, 47, co-owner and chief financial officer of Price Urban Development. Publicly, they were one of Seattle's polished power couples, photographed at hospital benefits and arts fundraisers, always standing shoulder to shoulder. They had been married for 22 years and had a 19-year-old son at college in Oregon. Evelyn was not merely attached to Nolan personally, she controlled the financial system supporting his professional life. Her name appeared on corporate registrations, charitable foundations, and most of the properties linked to the company. Nolan had apparently neglected to mention any of that when Claire described him to me as a generous donor with an oversized ego. Luis estimated the affair had been active for at least 6 months based on hotel records visible through shared financial statements and Nolan's recurring movements. I could legally review my own joint credit card, and there I found dinners Claire had categorized as donor expenses, rides to hotels when she claimed to be with Melissa, and a $438 purchase at a men's boutique 2 days before Nolan's birthday. She had bought him a cashmere scarf using our joint card, then told me the charge was a thank you gift for a foundation chairman. The scarf was not financially important. We could afford it. But that $438 bothered me more than the hotel rooms because I pictured her choosing the color, touching the fabric, deciding what would flatter him. Sex could be dismissed as impulse. Shopping required imagination. The obvious move was to contact Evelyn immediately, but obvious moves are often emotional moves wearing a sensible coat. I needed to know whether she was unaware, complicit, volatile, or already planning something of her own. I also needed to avoid approaching her in any manner that could look threatening or manipulative. Rebecca advised me to send one restrained message from my professional email, identify myself, say I possessed verified information affecting both our marriages, and offer to meet with counsel present if she wished. I drafted the message 7 times. The final version contained 84 words. Evelyn responded 11 minutes later. I know who you are. I suspected there was someone, but I did not know it was Claire. I will meet you tomorrow at 4 p.m. at my attorney's office. Bring proof. Her attorney, Dana Holloway, occupied the 31st floor of a tower overlooking the Sound. Evelyn was already seated when Rebecca and I entered. She wore a navy suit, no wedding ring, and the controlled expression of someone who had spent an entire night arranging her grief into categories. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, but the skin around her eyes was swollen. She did not shake my hand. She said, "Show me." I placed the tablet on the table and played the 47-second recording. Evelyn watched without moving. When Nolan's reflection appeared, her breath caught once. When Claire said his name, Evelyn closed her eyes. I stopped the video before the final second. "How did you get this?" she asked. "I came home early." "Was that your bedroom?" "Yes." She looked toward the windows. 31 floors below us, traffic flowed along wet streets, each car moving as though nothing had changed. "He told me Thursday afternoons were site inspections," she said. "For 6 months, maybe longer. I thought there were escorts. Or someone from the company." "Why someone from the company?" Rebecca asked. Evelyn looked at her attorney before answering. Dana gave a small nod. "Because Nolan has been moving money," Evelyn said. "Not enough to trigger immediate alarms, but enough to suggest he was preparing for something. Consulting payments, hotel expenses, cash withdrawals. I confronted him in May. He told me the expenditures were connected to a confidential acquisition." "Did you believe him?" I asked. "No. But our company has 3 projects awaiting municipal approval, and an ugly public divorce would affect financing. I needed facts before I moved. There was no instant alliance between us, no melodramatic recognition that we were destined to save each other. There were 2 betrayed people sitting across a conference table, each wondering whether the other represented help or another complication." Evelyn asked how long I had known. I told her 13 days. She seemed surprised. "And Claire still has no idea?" "No. How can you sit across from her?" "The same way you sit across from Nolan." For the first time, she looked directly at me rather than at the evidence. Something passed between us then, not attraction, not yet, but recognition. We belonged to the same terrible club and neither of us had applied for membership. Evelyn opened a slim folder. Inside were copies of invoices from a consulting firm called Cascadia Cultural Strategies. Claire's company. Nolan had directed Price Urban Development to pay Claire's firm $86,000 over 9 months for donor relations consulting connected to projects that did not appear to require such services. Claire had told me her business revenue had increased because of new museum contracts. Some of that money had entered the account she used for business expenses, but none had reached our joint household records. "He's been paying her," Evelyn said. "I don't know whether this was legitimate work, gifts disguised as fees, or preparation for a life together." A pressure formed behind my ribs. The affair was no longer confined to my bedroom. Claire and Nolan had built a financial corridor between their lives. "Can you access the underlying agreements?" I asked. "I can," Evelyn said. "But before I do, I need to know your objective." "Divorce. Protection of my assets. The truth in a form neither of them can rewrite." "Revenge?" I took a moment before answering. I would be lying if I said I didn't want it. But I don't want chaos. I want Nolan to admit what happened, when it began, what he promised Claire, and what money changed hands. On a recording. Voluntarily if possible. Evelyn's expression tightened. "Nolan never volunteers anything that weakens him." Then we create circumstances where the truth is his least damaging option. Dana interrupted. Careful. No threats, no unlawful detention, no extortion, no games with corporate access. If either of you crosses that line, I walk. Understood, I said. Evelyn kept watching me. You've thought about confronting him. Every hour since I saw him. So have I. That was how the partnership began, not with romance, seduction, or even trust, but with boundaries written on a yellow legal pad in Dana Holloway's conference room. We would preserve admissible records. We would not fabricate evidence. We would not threaten violence or demand money. We would coordinate divorce filings so Nolan and Claire could not warn each other. And before those filings landed, we would try to obtain Nolan's full recorded account in a controlled setting where he believed cooperation protected him from worse professional consequences. Evelyn could bring him there. I could make him understand the legal landscape. There is one more issue, Evelyn said as the meeting ended. Nolan knows who you are professionally. He has asked about you. When? After the Maritime Gala. He said Claire's husband was a litigator and wanted to know whether you handled land use disputes. I thought he was considering hiring you. The room seemed to narrow. Did he ask anything else? Whether you traveled often. Whether you worked weekends. Whether your marriage was solid. I remembered Nolan's hand around mine beneath the gala lights, his smile when he called me lucky. He had not been making conversation. He had been measuring the locks before entering the house. Evelyn slid the consulting invoices back into her folder, then said, if we're going to make him talk, Graham, we should assume he has already prepared a story for both of us. I stood and buttoned my coat. Then we don't ask him questions he can answer with that story. Outside the building, evening rain swept sideways between the towers. Evelyn stopped beneath the awning while Rebecca and Dana walked ahead. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, Claire attended my birthday dinner in February. She sat beside me for 3 hours. I did not know what response could possibly help. Melissa hugged me last weekend, I said. Evelyn gave a quiet, humorless laugh. So we were both surrounded. Not anymore. She studied my face as though deciding whether to believe that. No, she said. Not anymore. My phone vibrated inside my pocket. A message from Claire appeared on the screen, Melissa wants us over for dinner Friday. She says she barely sees you anymore. Can you make time? I showed it to Evelyn. Her eyes moved across the words, then returned to mine. Go, she said. If Melissa helped them, she may reveal more when she thinks you're still blind. I typed back that Friday sounded perfect. Then Claire sent a heart, bright red against the screen, and I understood that the next stage would require more than patience. I was going to sit at Melissa's table, eat food prepared by someone who had lent my wife a bedroom for her affair, and let both sisters believe they still knew exactly who I was. They had mistaken restraint for weakness. By the time they understood the difference, Nolan Price would already be sitting across from me with a recorder running. Melissa served cedar plank salmon, roasted asparagus, and the same Oregon Pinot Noir she had brought to our house on my 45th birthday, and the entire evening unfolded with such practiced normality that I began to understand how long she must have been rehearsing around me. Her townhouse was all pale wood, glass, and carefully placed abstract art, the kind of home that looked staged even when someone lived in it. I had been there dozens of times, yet now every room seemed to contain a second version of itself. The kitchen island was where Melissa mixed cocktails for family holidays, but it was also where she had probably poured Nolan a drink while he waited for my wife. The upstairs hallway led to the guest room where I had once slept after helping Melissa move furniture, and where Claire had later taken another man. You've been quiet lately, Melissa said as she spooned potatoes onto my plate. Is everything okay at work? She was 39, 4 years younger than Claire, with the same hazel eyes and the same habit of tilting her head when she wanted to appear concerned. Just a complicated case, I said. One of those situations where everyone involved thinks they're the smartest person in the room. Claire smiled across the table. That sounds like every case you handle. Usually one of them is wrong. Melissa poured more wine into my glass, although I had barely touched what was already there. Well, promise you won't become one of those lawyers who wakes up at 60 and realizes he missed his whole life. I'll try. I'm serious. Claire spends too many evenings alone. The audacity of that sentence was almost beautiful. Claire lowered her eyes with a small, wounded expression, playing the neglected wife while sitting 3 feet from the sister who had provided a meeting place for her lover. Graham works hard for both of us, she said. I know, Melissa replied. I'm only saying marriage needs attention. I cut a piece of salmon and chewed slowly. That's good advice. Where did you learn it? Melissa laughed, but the sound came a fraction too late. Claire reached for her water. What does that mean? Nothing, I said. Melissa has always been the relationship expert in the family. The conversation moved on, but I had disturbed the surface. For the rest of dinner, Claire watched me more carefully. I kept my face relaxed and asked Melissa about her consulting work. She said business was slow. That interested me because Claire had claimed to spend several evenings helping Melissa manage an influx of new clients. When dessert arrived, I excused myself to use the bathroom upstairs. I did not search drawers or open doors. I had no legal right to explore her home, and I did not need to. I simply paused in the hallway and looked at the guestroom carpet. Near the doorframe was a small dark stain shaped like a crescent. 3 weeks earlier, Claire had complained that Nolan spilled bourbon on our bedroom rug and joked that he was becoming careless. I had heard her say it on the video after I thought the important part was over. Now I wondered whether she had meant our house or Melissa's. On a narrow console table outside the room stood a framed photograph from Melissa's birthday the previous spring. Claire and I were on the left. Nolan and Evelyn were on the right. Melissa stood between the two couples with her arms around Claire and Evelyn, smiling into the camera. I photographed the picture without touching it. It did not prove anything, but it captured the obscenity of the arrangement better than invoices ever could. Downstairs, Melissa had begun telling Claire about a friend who discovered her boyfriend was using a dating app. She went through his laptop while he was asleep, Melissa said. Honestly, I think invading someone's privacy is almost as bad as cheating. Almost? I asked as I returned to the table. Melissa shrugged. You know what I mean. If there's no trust, the relationship is already over. I agree, I said. Once someone creates a hidden life, it's difficult to know which part was real. Claire's dessert fork clicked against her plate. That's a grim way of putting it. Occupational hazard. On the drive home, she waited until we crossed the floating bridge before speaking. Rain blurred the lights around us, and Lake Washington was a black absence beyond the guardrail. Did something happen between you and Melissa? Why would you ask that? You were strange with her. I'm tired. No, you made those comments about hidden lives and people thinking they're smart. She brought up cheating, not me. Claire turned toward the passenger window. Sometimes I feel like you cross-examine people without realizing it. I always realize it. Her head turned back sharply. I let the silence remain for 3 seconds, then softened my voice. I'm sorry. That sounded harsher than I meant. The case is getting under my skin. Her shoulders loosened. She touched my arm. You can talk to me, you know. I know. That night, she waited until she thought I was asleep, took her phone into the bathroom, and turned on the shower before making a call. I could not hear the words, but Luis reported the next morning that Nolan received a 9-minute call from her at 12:18 a.m. Less than an hour later, Nolan sent himself copies of several corporate files and deleted 2 appointments from his digital calendar. They were getting nervous. Nervous people accelerate. They make unnecessary calls, move documents too quickly, and ask questions that reveal what frightens them. Evelyn and I decided to give them something specific to fear. 3 days later, Price Urban Development received a routine-looking legal preservation notice from a former subcontractor involved in a dispute over one of Nolan's projects. My firm did not represent the subcontractor, and the notice had nothing to do with the affair, but Evelyn knew Nolan would see my name copied on an old chain of correspondence because I had briefly advised another party 18 months earlier. She placed a printed copy on Nolan's desk and asked casually whether he knew me. According to Evelyn, he read my name twice before saying, "Met him once." "Why?" "You asked about hiring him after the museum gala," she replied. "Did I? You tell me." Nolan dismissed it as forgotten networking, but that afternoon he cancelled a planned meeting with Claire at a hotel near SeaTac. Claire came home early carrying groceries she had not planned to buy. "Thought I'd cook tonight," she said. "We haven't had a proper evening together in weeks." She made lemon chicken, opened a bottle of wine, and wore the green sweater I had once told her made her eyes brighter. She asked about my clients, my blood pressure, and whether I wanted to spend a weekend on Whidbey Island. Then she initiated intimacy for the first time in nearly 2 months. I declined gently and said I had a headache. The disappointment on her face lasted only a moment before fear replaced it. "Are you angry with me?" "Should I be?" "No. I just feel like you've been somewhere else lately." There was a cruel symmetry in hearing her say that. "Work," I answered. "That's all." She nodded, but I could see her calculating. Before discovery, I had interpreted Claire's expressions through love. Afterward, I saw the machinery underneath them. The following morning, Evelyn called from a number not linked to her name. "He asked whether we had updated the security system at the Bellevue conference property," she said. "Why would that matter?" "Because that's where I told him to meet me next Thursday." Price Urban owned a furnished house on the eastern shore of Lake Washington, used for private negotiations with investors who wanted discretion. Evelyn could access it, and Nolan considered it part of his domain. We chose it because neither of them could claim I had invaded their home, because entry could be documented, and because Dana had approved the exact boundaries of the encounter. No weapon. No blocked exit. No physical contact. 2 visible cameras recording the common area. Dana and Rebecca would wait in vehicles less than a minute away. Evelyn would invite Nolan there under the pretense of discussing discrepancies in the consulting invoices. I would enter only after he arrived and agreed to speak. If he tried to leave, we would let him leave. The leverage would be evidence and timing, nothing else. I had imagined confronting Nolan hundreds of times, and in most of those private rehearsals I frightened him. Reality required something more disciplined. My objective was not to make him afraid of me. It was to make dishonesty more dangerous than confession. Meanwhile, Luis continued following the evidence. A former assistant at Claire's firm told him Nolan had first hired Claire for legitimate fundraising advice 14 months earlier. Their personal relationship appeared to have begun around 10 months ago, not 6. Hotel charges started later because Melissa's townhouse had been their primary meeting place. The assistant remembered Melissa delivering an envelope to Claire at the office and joking, "Your field trip permission slip." More important, she recalled Claire saying she needed to get through Graham's equity settlement before making any major life changes. I knew immediately what that meant. My firm had represented a group of condominium owners in a construction defect case that settled for $6.8 million. My contingency share, after expenses and partner distributions, was expected to exceed $900,000 before tax. The final payment had been delayed by an insurance dispute, but Claire knew it was coming. She had attended the celebratory dinner when we reached the original settlement. Rebecca reviewed the timeline and said, "Do not assume motive from one remark, but prepare for the possibility she planned to stay until that fee became marital property." I wanted to reject the idea. Claire and I had 17 years behind us. Surely she had not reduced the last year to a countdown toward a check. Then Evelyn found a message. Nolan had used a secondary email address on a tablet connected to their shared home network. She did not bypass a password, the account had been left open on a device she jointly owned, and Dana instructed her to photograph the screen without navigating deeper than what was already visible. The message was from Claire, sent 6 weeks earlier. Once Graham's settlement clears, I can move without walking away empty-handed. Melissa thinks late fall is safest. Please stop pushing me before then. I read those words in Rebecca's office. The first time, they seemed clinical. The second time, the phrase walking away empty-handed burned itself into me. Claire had lived in a house half owned by her, enjoyed the income we both earned, built a successful consultancy partly through introductions I had made, and still described leaving me without part of a future legal fee as leaving empty-handed. She was planning to go, I said. Yes, Rebecca replied. This isn't only an affair. It's an exit schedule. And Melissa advised her on timing. Apparently. I looked again at the message. Can we use it? Potentially, but Evelyn's attorney will manage the evidentiary questions. For now, it tells us what Claire believes she is waiting for. The settlement payment was expected within 3 weeks. Claire intended to remain my wife until it arrived, then position herself to claim a share while moving toward Nolan. She had not known that the fee structure and much of the underlying work predated several relevant financial arrangements, so the final classification would be complicated. But complexity was exactly what she counted on. She did not need a perfect claim. She needed bargaining power. I left the office and walked without direction for nearly an hour, past the brick facades of Pioneer Square and down toward the waterfront. Ferries crossed the bay beneath a ceiling of clouds. Tourists clustered near the piers, laughing under umbrellas, and I felt strangely detached from all of them. This is the part one want you to sit with, because people often say betrayal makes the past feel fake. That was not quite what happened to me. The good years did not vanish. The mornings we drank coffee on the back steps, the trips we took, the nights we held each other after losing pregnancies, those moments had existed. But Claire had begun treating our history as collateral. She was borrowing against everything we had been to finance the person she wanted to become. I called Evelyn. She was waiting for my settlement, I said. I know. Her voice was quiet. Nolan was waiting for our refinancing. The company closes a $34 million credit facility next month. He wanted it completed before provoking a divorce. They both planned to use us until their money was secure. Yes. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then Evelyn said, I don't want to wait until Thursday. We stick to the plan. He ate breakfast across from me this morning and complained that I had bought the wrong coffee. I wanted to pour it over him. I know. No, Graham, you know your version of this. Her voice cracked for the first time since I met her. I helped build that company from 4 employees to 83. I mortgaged my parents' house when Nolan couldn't make payroll in 2009. And now he's arranging the timing of our divorce around a credit facility as if I'm a line item he needs to preserve. Then don't give him a story where you became irrational and he became the victim. She inhaled slowly. You sound like Dana. Dana is right. That doesn't make it less infuriating. No. It just makes it useful. The line went quiet again, and when Evelyn spoke, her voice had steadied. Thursday, then. In the days before the confrontation, our partnership shifted in ways neither of us discussed. Evelyn began calling in the evenings after Nolan left for supposed meetings. We compared details, but sometimes the conversation wandered. She told me about restoring old sailboats with her father when she was a teenager. I told her about the used bookstore my mother had owned in Tacoma. She confessed that she had stopped painting 10 years earlier because Nolan mocked anything that did not generate revenue. I admitted I had wanted to teach law someday but kept postponing it because Claire liked the income and status of private practice. These were not romantic conversations. They were two people recovering pieces of themselves through a stranger who understood why those pieces had gone missing. Yet there was tension in the intimacy of it, a boundary neither of us crossed but both of us noticed. One night she said, "I keep wondering whether Claire knows how you take your coffee. 2 sugars when I'm tired, none when I'm angry." That's unusually specific. She used to know. "Nolan has no idea I hate lilies. He sends them every anniversary because they photograph well." We both laughed, and the laughter felt disloyal even though neither of us had anything left to protect. I ended the call shortly afterward. Revenge creates its own gravity. If you are not careful, everyone involved begins orbiting the people who hurt them, and every new connection becomes another extension of the betrayal. I did not want Evelyn to become a weapon I used against Claire, and I did not want to become that for her. On Wednesday evening, Claire found the first crack in my mask. I came home to see her standing in my office with the drawer of my filing cabinet open. "What are you doing?" I asked. She turned too quickly. "Looking for the appliance warranty. The dishwasher is making that noise again. The warranties are downstairs." I forgot. I set my briefcase on the desk. "What did you expect to find in there?" Her face changed, not into guilt but offense. "Why are you talking to me like that?" "Because you're searching my private client files." I opened one drawer. A locked drawer. It wasn't locked. I knew it had been. She had found a small key I kept behind a row of books. Nothing relating to her was stored there, but her decision mattered. "Claire, get out of my office." "Graham, now." She stared at me. In 17 years, I had never used that tone with her. For a second, the person beneath her performance appeared, frightened, resentful, and furious that I might possess information she could not access. Then her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what is happening to us," she whispered. "You shut me out, you barely touch me, and now you're treating me like a criminal." I could have ended it there. I could have shown her the video, the invoices, the message about my settlement, and watched the lies rearrange themselves. Instead, I said, "I have a difficult client matter. Confidentiality isn't optional. I need you to respect that." "Is that all this is?" "What else would it be?" She searched my face, and I gave her nothing. That night, Louise observed her driving to Melissa's townhouse. Nolan arrived 26 minutes later. They stayed until after midnight. Thursday morning, Claire told me she had spent the night comforting Melissa after a panic attack. She kissed me near the corner of my mouth and said, "I'm sorry about yesterday." "So am I. Maybe we'd be this weekend. Let's talk tonight." There would be nothing left to discuss by then. At 3:40 that afternoon, Evelyn entered the Bellevue property and activated the cameras. Dana confirmed the feeds were recording. Rebecca waited in a black sedan down the road. I parked behind a stand of cedar trees where Nolan could not see my car from the driveway. At 4:06, his Range Rover pulled in. Evelyn texted one word, "Here." I watched rain bead along my windshield while 11 minutes passed. Later, Evelyn told me Nolan began by accusing her of misunderstanding ordinary consulting expenses. He said Claire had access to donors he needed for a cultural development partnership. When Evelyn mentioned a secondary email account, he denied using it. When she placed the photograph of Claire's message on the table, he stopped denying and began minimizing. It was emotional. It had crossed a line only recently. Claire was confused about her marriage. He was trying to help. At 4:19, Evelyn sent the second agreed message, "Ready." I entered through the unlocked front door. The house smelled of new leather and cedar, with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the dark water. Nolan sat at the end of a long dining table. Evelyn stood near the windows with both arms folded. When he saw me, he rose so abruptly that the chair rolled backward. "What the hell is this?" "Sit down, Nolan. You don't tell me what to do in my property." It's jointly held corporate property, Evelyn said. And you accepted my invitation to discuss company expenses. Nolan looked from her to me. For a moment, he considered leaving. The hallway and front door remained clear. I stepped aside to make that obvious. You're free to go, I said. If you leave, the divorce petitions are filed today using the evidence we already possess, the disputed consulting payments are referred for independent forensic review, and the relevant corporate board members receive preservation notices before close of business. If you stay, you have one opportunity to provide an accurate account before those steps occur. That sounds like extortion. No one is asking you for money, property, or favorable terms. Nothing you say will stop either divorce. You are being offered an opportunity to correct the false statements you made to Evelyn minutes ago. You may call your attorney. You may leave. You may refuse to answer. I pointed toward one of the cameras. The room is being recorded. There are attorneys nearby, and they approved the procedure. So decide carefully which accusation you want to make next. His face lost color. Does Claire know about this? Sit down, Evelyn repeated. This time, he did. I remained on the opposite side of the table, leaving more than 6 feet between us. State your full name, I said. Nolan gave a bitter laugh. You think this is a deposition? No. In a deposition, you would be under oath and represented by counsel. This is your chance to speak before everyone else receives the documents. Do you consent to being recorded? He stared at the camera. Do I have a choice? Yes. The door. He looked toward Evelyn. You're really doing this? I spent 22 years doing everything with you, she said. This is the first thing I'm doing because of you. Nolan rubbed his mouth, then said, Fine. I consent. The questioning lasted 38 minutes. At first he minimized everything. He claimed the affair began in April after Claire told him our marriage had been emotionally dead for years. I placed a hotel receipt from the previous December in front of him. He moved the date to November. Evelyn produced a photograph of them entering Melissa's townhouse in September. He said they had only talked that night. I showed him a message in which Claire thanked him for making Melissa leave us the whole evening. Each time he lied, evidence narrowed the space around him. When did the sexual relationship begin? I asked again. Late September. Where? He looked down. Melissa's townhouse. Did Melissa know? Yes. From the beginning? Not the first time. Claire told her afterward. Did Melissa subsequently provide access to the townhouse so you could meet Claire? Yes. My hands remained flat against the table. How often? I don't know. Estimate. Maybe twice a month. Evelyn placed a printed calendar beside him. Your vehicle entered that development 11 times in 10 weeks. Nolan swallowed. Then more than twice. The confession came apart in layers. The relationship began 10 months earlier. Melissa had known for at least 9. She created alibis, let them use her guest room, and sometimes messaged me from Claire's phone so location sharing would make it appear Claire was still with her. The $86,000 in consulting fees included legitimate work, but Nolan admitted at least $31,000 covered travel, gifts, and cash he wanted Claire to control without my knowledge. He said Claire planned to leave after my settlement fee arrived. He planned to wait until Price Urban's refinancing closed. Were you planning to leave Evelyn for Claire? I asked. Nolan looked at Claire's message on the table. We discussed it. That was not my question. I hadn't decided. What did you tell Claire? That I would. Evelyn's expression did not change, but one hand tightened around her opposite wrist. And what did you actually intend? I asked. He looked toward the camera as if it might offer an answer. I intended to see how things developed. Meaning? Meaning I wasn't going to destroy my marriage and company for a relationship that might not last. But you encouraged Claire to destroy hers. Claire made her own decisions. Did you love her? He exhaled and leaned back. I cared about her. Did you love her? No. The word settled into the room with more force than anything else he had said. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. I felt no satisfaction. Only a bleak certainty about what would happen when Claire eventually heard it. What was she to you? I asked. Graham, Evelyn warned softly, perhaps sensing where I was going. But Nolan answered. She was available. She admired me. Things at home had become complicated. Evelyn gave a small laugh without humor. Complicated because I was investigating the money you were moving. Nolan ignored her. Claire wanted more than I did. I told her what she wanted to hear because otherwise she would have ended it. So you used her. She used me too. She wanted connections, money, a way out of your marriage. Don't make her innocent because you need me to be the only villain. I don't, I said. I know exactly who my wife is now. Let me pause here, because this was the moment I had imagined would feel like victory. Nolan Price was sitting across from me, admitting the affair, the payments, Melissa's involvement, and the fact that he had never intended to build a life with Claire. I had the recording I wanted. I had remained controlled. I had given him every opportunity to leave. Yet there was no triumph in the room. Evelyn looked as though 22 years had been carved out of her while she was still awake, and I understood that obtaining the truth is not the same as being repaired by it. When I finished, I asked Nolan whether he had answered voluntarily and whether anyone had threatened him with physical harm. He said no. I asked whether he understood that neither divorce outcome had been promised in exchange for his statements. He said yes. Then I told him he could leave. He stood, but Evelyn spoke before he reached the hallway. Your access to non-essential company systems has been suspended pending a forensic audit. The board meets tomorrow morning. Dana will send your attorney the petition. Nolan turned toward her. You can't run Price Urban without me. I have been running it around you for years. Evelyn, don't turn a personal issue into corporate sabotage. You diverted company funds to conceal an affair with a consultant. You turned it into a corporate issue. His eyes moved to me. And what do you get out of this? You think Claire will run back to you when she realizes I'm not available? She won't have anywhere to run back to. Something ugly entered his expression. He stepped closer, though he remained several feet away. You were never enough for her. That's why she came to me. Every instinct in my body tightened. I pictured the blue tie on my stairs. His bare foot in my mirror. His hand shaking mine beneath the museum lights. But I did not move. Maybe, I said. And you were not enough for her to leave until my money arrived. That should tell both of us what we were actually dealing with. Nolan's mouth opened, then closed. He walked out. 30 seconds later, his vehicle tore down the wet driveway. Dana and Rebecca entered through the side door. They reviewed the recording, confirmed the time, and began copying it to secured storage. Evelyn stayed near the window. I approached but stopped at a respectful distance. Are you all right? It was a foolish question. No, she said. Are you? No. She looked at me then, and the control she had maintained finally broke. Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away almost angrily. I hated hearing him say he didn't love her, she whispered. Not because I wanted him to love Claire. Because it means he risked everything we built for something he didn't even value. I know. How? Because Claire risked 17 years for a man she did not trust enough to leave without securing my settlement first. Evelyn nodded. Her hand rested on the back of a chair, inches from mine. Neither of us closed the distance. We did not turn our spouse's betrayal into permission to create another one. That mattered to me, Rebecca placed a folder on the table. Graham, your petition is ready. Once we file, Claire will be served at the location you approved. I looked at the time. It was 5:12. Claire would be preparing for the foundation dinner at the Olympic Hotel, the one she had discussed over Thai food while Nolan's cologne was still being erased from our kitchen. More than 200 donors, board members, consultants, and sponsors would be there. Melissa would attend. Nolan had been expected to deliver brief remarks on behalf of Price Urban. Evelyn's audit had already ensured he would not. I had rejected the idea of exposing Claire publicly in the ballroom. Humiliation in front of 200 people might satisfy an audience, but it would also let her claim I wanted spectacle more than truth. Instead, a professional process server would wait in the hotel's private administrative corridor and deliver the petition after Claire finished greeting guests but before dinner began. Melissa would be served at the same time with a preservation demand relating to communications and records relevant to the disputed payments and anticipated litigation. Quiet. Lawful. Precise. File it, I said. At 6:03, while I sat in Rebecca's car outside the Bellevue property, the court accepted the petition electronically. At 6:41, Evelyn's petition was filed through Dana's office. At 7:08, Claire called me. I let it ring once before answering. Her breathing was sharp and uneven. Behind her, I heard hotel staff moving carts and someone asking whether the place cards had been corrected. "What did you do?" she demanded. "I filed for divorce. There's a man here with papers." Melissa got some kind of legal notice. "Graham, what is happening?" "The consequences of choices you made repeatedly for 10 months. Silence. Then a door shut on her end, and the background noise disappeared. "Where are you?" "With my attorney. You know." Her voice became small. "Yes." "How much?" "Enough." "Graham, please don't do anything until I can explain. You had 10 months to prepare an explanation. It isn't what you think. You and Nolan had sex in our bedroom while your clothes were spread across the house. Which part requires interpretation?" She made a sound that was half breath, half sob. "You were there. I came home early. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wanted to learn whether the woman upstairs was someone I still recognized. I made a terrible mistake. A mistake doesn't need hotel reservations, consulting invoices, and a townhouse provided by your sister." She began crying then, but unlike the tears in my office, these sounded uncontrolled. Melissa didn't, she was trying to protect me. "From what?" "From you finding out before I knew what I wanted. That is not protection. That is participation. Can you come home? Please. We shouldn't do this over the phone. I won't be home tonight. Rebecca will communicate the temporary arrangements." "Graham, wait. Nolan said he was going to leave Evelyn. He said we had a future." I looked through the windshield at the lake house where he had denied loving her less than an hour earlier. "Then you should call him. He isn't answering." "That sounds like your problem." I ended the call. She rang again immediately, then 7 more times over the next 20 minutes. I did not answer. Melissa sent 3 messages, beginning with "You've misunderstood my role" and ending with "Please don't destroy Claire over one bad period in your marriage." I forwarded them to Rebecca without responding. By 9 that evening, Evelyn had received 14 calls from Nolan. She answered only after Dana instructed her to confirm where he would stay. He demanded access to their house, threatened to call an emergency board meeting, and accused her of conspiring with me to steal the company. Then he asked whether she had shown Claire the recording. "Not yet," Evelyn told me later. But he sounded terrified that I would. He should be. "Are you going to play it for her?" I watched rain gather beneath a streetlight outside the furnished apartment Rebecca had arranged for me. "Yes. But not tonight." "Why not?" "Because tonight she is still telling herself Nolan chose her." I want her calm enough to hear what he actually said. Evelyn was silent for a moment. That is cold. It is. Do you feel guilty? Not yet. The next morning, Claire's attorney contacted Rebecca and requested an immediate settlement conference. Claire claimed the consulting payments were legitimate separate business income and accused me of surveilling her unlawfully. The accusation disappeared after Rebecca disclosed that the initial discovery occurred inside my own home and that subsequent work had been performed by a licensed investigator from public locations. Melissa retained separate counsel and insisted she had merely allowed her sister to use the townhouse without knowing why. Nolan's recorded confession contradicted that. We did not release it publicly. We did not need to. The existence of corroborated evidence changed every conversation behind closed doors. Price Urban's board placed Nolan on administrative leave pending an independent forensic audit. Evelyn retained operational control as CFO alongside an interim chief executive. The refinancing did not collapse, partly because she disclosed the issue to lenders before rumors could distort it. Nolan had expected the company to protect his reputation. Instead, the company protected itself from him. Claire arrived at Rebecca's office 4 days later for the first settlement meeting. It was the first time I had seen her since she kissed me goodbye on the morning of the confrontation. She looked smaller, as though sleep deprivation had physically reduced her. Her hair was pulled into an uneven knot. She wore no makeup and kept twisting her wedding ring around her finger. Melissa sat beside her until Rebecca informed them that Melissa could not participate in a confidential meeting where her own conduct might become relevant. As Melissa stood to leave, she looked at me and said, "I loved you like a brother." Then you have a dangerous understanding of love. Her face hardened. Claire was miserable. So you lent her a room. I was trying to stop her from making impulsive decisions. For 9 months. Melissa opened her mouth, but her attorney touched her elbow and guided her out. Claire watched the door close, then turned to me. "I want to speak to my husband alone." "Your husband has counsel," Rebecca said. "You may address him with both attorneys present." Claire's lawyer whispered something to her. She nodded, wiped her cheeks, and said, "I'm sorry. I know that sounds meaningless now, but I am. I ended things with Nolan. He stopped answering you before you ended anything." Her expression shifted. "He told you that?" "He told me much more." I placed a small speaker on the table. Claire stared at it. "What is that?" "Nolan's account of the affair." "You spoke to him?" "He consented to a recorded conversation." Her attorney objected to playing anything before reviewing it, so Rebecca handed him a transcript. He read several pages, stopped, and asked for a private conference with Claire. Before they left the room, Claire saw one sentence near the top of the open page. "Did you love her?" "No." She froze. Her eyes moved to the next lines. "She was available. She admired me." Claire grabbed the transcript before her attorney could close it. "He said this?" "Under recording," I answered. "He's lying." "Which part?" "He loved me. He was leaving Evelyn." Evelyn had warned me that hearing the truth might not make Claire accept it. People protect the fantasy that justified their worst behavior because surrendering it means admitting the destruction purchased nothing. "Listen to his voice," I said. Her attorney advised against it, but Claire insisted. We played less than 3 minutes, Nolan admitting Melissa's knowledge, acknowledging the money, saying he never intended to leave before the refinancing, and finally denying he loved Claire. She sat absolutely still until he called her available. Then she lunged forward and stopped the recording. "Turn it off." No one spoke. Claire stared at the table, her breathing shallow. "He told me Evelyn was cold," she whispered. "He said they had separate lives. He said she only cared about the company. He told Evelyn our marriage was emotionally dead and you came to him for comfort. That isn't true. Neither was the story he gave you." But you believe everything he said about me? Her voice sharpened. Of course you do. It makes this easier. It lets you act superior. Nothing about this has been easy. You planned all of this behind my back. The absurdity of that accusation silenced even her attorney. I leaned forward. You brought a married man into our bed. You used your sister's home to hide him. You accepted money through your business while waiting for my settlement to clear. And your complaint is that I learned the truth without notifying you first. Claire began crying again. I wasn't waiting for your money. Rebecca slid a copy of Claire's email across the table. Once Graham's settlement clears, I can move without walking away empty-handed. Claire read it and seemed to understand that denial was no longer a strategy. I was afraid, she said. Of what? Of starting over with nothing. You had your company, half our shared assets, years of earning capacity, and legal rights in a divorce. You did not have nothing. You always controlled the serious money. We reviewed every account together. Because you understood it and I didn't. You run a consulting firm. It isn't the same. Her explanations were not designed to be consistent. They were designed to move responsibility 1 inch away from her at a time. Work made her lonely. My competence made her powerless. Our fertility losses made her vulnerable. Nolan manipulated her. Melissa only wanted to help. The affair happened because she felt invisible, yet she had delayed leaving because being my wife remained financially useful. Each statement contradicted another, but emotion was supposed to bridge the gaps. Finally, I asked the only question that still mattered. When did you stop choosing our marriage? Claire's face crumpled. I don't know. Then why should I choose it now? She reached across the table, but I moved my hand away. Because 17 years should count for something. They counted for enough that I did not destroy you publicly. They counted for enough that I gathered facts before acting. They counted for enough that I am sitting here instead of communicating only through counsel. But they do not count as permission to take an 18th year. Claire lowered her hand. There it was, the first irreversible boundary I had spoken directly to her. Not revenge. Not a threat. An ending. Her attorney requested a recess, and the meeting stopped. Outside the conference room, Evelyn was waiting near the elevators with Dana. Her own settlement session with Nolan would begin in 20 minutes. She looked at me and understood from my face that Claire had heard the recording. How was it? She asked. Worse than I expected. For her or for you? Both. Evelyn nodded. Dana and Rebecca stepped away to confer. Claire emerged from the room at that moment and saw us standing together. Her grief vanished beneath instant suspicion. She looked from Evelyn to me, measuring the quiet familiarity between us. So that's what this is, she said. You two plan to replace us with each other. Evelyn's expression became very still. No, Claire. We plan to stop being used by you. You expect me to believe nothing happened? Nothing happened, I said. Not that your standards are relevant anymore. Claire laughed bitterly. Of course. You're both so honorable. We had opportunities to become what you were, Evelyn replied. We declined. The elevator doors opened behind her. Before entering, Evelyn added, that difference is going to matter to us long after you stop pretending it doesn't. Claire watched her disappear, then turned back to me. You have feelings for her. I could have lied. Instead, I said, I feel understood by her. That is as far as it has gone. Claire's eyes filled again. You never gave me this much effort. I gave you 17 years. She had no answer. Rebecca called me back into the conference room, and I left Claire in the hallway beside the closed elevator doors. The legal fight was only beginning. The forensic audit had not yet revealed its most damaging result. Melissa had not admitted how deeply she had been involved, and Nolan was about to discover that the recorded confession was not the only evidence he had handed us. Yet as I sat down across from Claire's empty chair, I realized the outcome no longer depended entirely on what she lost. For the first time since I smelled another man's cologne in my hallway, I had begun thinking about what my own life might become when I stopped organizing it around her decisions. The forensic audit found the second set of payments 11 days later. Nolan had not merely inflated Claire's consulting invoices. He had approved $124,000 in transfers to a shell company registered by an old college friend in Spokane, then used that company to pay for hotel suites, private travel, gifts, and a deposit on a waterfront condominium in Kirkland. Claire's name did not appear on the purchase agreement, but messages recovered from Nolan's company account showed that he had taken her to view the property twice and encouraged her to choose the finishes. He had presented it as the home they would share after both divorces. In reality, Nolan had placed the condominium under a limited liability company controlled solely by him. Claire had selected white oak cabinets and blue-gray stone counters for a future she would never legally own. Evelyn called me after Dana informed the board. He made her decorate his investment property, she said. There was no pleasure in her voice. And he used company money for the deposit. What happens now? The board is terminating him for cause and referring the financial findings to outside counsel. Whether it becomes a criminal matter won't be my decision. How much did Claire know? The messages suggest she believed the money was Nolan's. I don't see evidence that she knew it came from the company. That distinction mattered, even if part of me wished it did not. I refused to accuse Claire of crimes unsupported by evidence. She had betrayed me, lied to me, and organized her departure around my anticipated income. Those facts were enough. I did not need to invent worse ones to justify leaving. Nolan's position collapsed quickly after that. Price Urban announced his departure in a short statement referring to violations of internal financial controls. The company did not mention the affair, Evelyn, Claire, or me. Nolan lost his operational authority, his board seat, and access to the credit facility he had spent months protecting. His attorneys shifted from aggression to containment. He stopped insisting Evelyn had sabotaged the company and began proposing settlements designed to keep the forensic report confidential where legally possible. Evelyn did not strip him of everything, because real divorces rarely end with one party leaving a courtroom carrying a cardboard box while the other inherits an empire. But the prenuptial agreement they had signed before building Price Urban treated certain acts of financial misconduct very differently from infidelity. The hidden transfers cost Nolan far more than the affair alone ever could have. Claire's strategy collapsed more quietly. My settlement fee arrived after our legal separation date and went into a segregated account under Rebecca's supervision. Its classification still required negotiation because some of the underlying work had occurred during the marriage, and I did not pretend every dollar was automatically mine. We hired neutral financial experts, traced when the income had been earned, deducted firm obligations, and reached a division that was lawful rather than theatrical. Claire received her equitable share of our legitimate marital property. She did not receive the windfall she had imagined, and the $31,000 in disguised personal benefits from Nolan became part of the financial accounting. The affair did not allow me to erase her ownership interest in 17 years of shared life. It did allow me to prevent her from rewriting the records. Melissa held to her story for nearly a month. She insisted she had learned about the affair only after it started, had begged Claire to end it, and allowed them to use her home because she feared Claire would otherwise meet Nolan in unsafe places. Then Louise found the reservation. 7 months before I discovered them, Melissa had booked a 3-night cabin near Leavenworth under her own name. Claire told me she was attending a professional retreat in Portland. Nolan told Evelyn he was inspecting land outside Wenatchee. Photographs from a private social media account showed Melissa drinking wine with them on the cabin deck the first evening before leaving in a separate car. She had not reluctantly tolerated the affair. She had helped arrange a romantic trip. When confronted through counsel, Melissa finally admitted the truth in a sworn declaration. Claire had told her about her attraction to Nolan before anything physical happened. Melissa encouraged her to find out whether the connection was real, because she believed I had become emotionally unavailable after our fertility struggles. She created excuses, forwarded messages, opened her townhouse to them, and helped Claire plan when to leave me. Her declaration included a sentence that stayed with me: I believed Graham would recover because he always recovers from everything. Think about that logic. Melissa decided my ability to survive made it acceptable to help injure me. Because I functioned after losing my mother, managed the household during Claire's depression, and returned to work after each miscarriage while privately falling apart, she treated my resilience as proof that consequences did not matter. People do this more often than they admit. They confuse strength with the absence of pain, then use your strength as permission to cause more of it. Claire called me the evening Melissa's declaration was finalized. The temporary communication agreement allowed calls about the house and finances, but I knew immediately this was about her sister. Melissa is blaming me for everything, she said. I read the declaration. She makes it sound like I planned this before Nolan and I were even together. Didn't you? I talked to her. Talking isn't planning. She booked the cabin. That was after things had started. You told me you were in Portland. Claire went silent. We had reached the familiar point where she searched for a distinction narrow enough to crawl through. I'm not defending what I did, she finally said. But Melissa encouraged me every time I had doubts. She hated that you and I looked stable because none of her relationships lasted. Melissa did not make vows to me. So you forgive her? No. But you blame me more. Yes, Claire. You were my wife. She began crying. I don't have anyone now. Nolan won't speak to me. Melissa hired her own attorney and barely answers. Half my clients know something happened because Price Urban terminated the contracts. People look at me differently. You had me. I know. No, you know it now. That is not the same thing. She asked whether we could meet without attorneys. I almost refused, but there were personal belongings at the house we needed to divide, and part of me wanted one conversation that did not occur beneath fluorescent office lights. We agreed on Saturday afternoon. Rebecca knew where I would be, and I kept the meeting brief. The house looked nearly unchanged when I entered, but it no longer felt like mine. Claire had removed our wedding photographs from the living room. 2 cardboard boxes stood near the stairs, filled with my books, running shoes, framed law school certificate, and the old brass desk clock my father gave me. The candle she had burned to hide Nolan's cologne was gone. For that, I was grateful. Claire wore jeans and a gray sweatshirt. She looked tired, but more present than she had during the settlement meetings. I made coffee, she said. 2 sugars. I don't want any. Her mouth tightened. She had remembered the detail only after losing the right to use it. We moved through the rooms and divided ordinary objects. I took my grandmother's dishes, the cast iron skillet, my record collection, and half the framed artwork. Claire kept the dining table, bedroom furniture, and most of the kitchenware. There was something brutally intimate about deciding who owned a lamp after sharing a life. At the foot of the stairs, I noticed a faint scratch in the oak where Nolan's belt buckle must have struck the wood. I ran my thumb over it. I can have that repaired, Claire said. It isn't the wood that bothers me. I know. We sat in the living room when the boxes were finished. Rain pressed softly against the windows, just as it had on the afternoon I came home early. Claire turned her wedding ring around her finger. Did you ever consider staying? She asked. During the first hours, yes. Not because I thought we could repair it. Because I was afraid of becoming someone without this marriage. And now? Now I'm afraid of what staying would teach me about myself. She looked down. I loved you. I believe you did. That surprised her. Then how can you be so final? Love is not the only requirement. You also needed to protect what we built when I wasn't in the room. You did the opposite. I was lost. You had options. Therapy. Honesty. Separation. Divorce. You chose deception because it allowed you to keep my stability and Nolan's attention at the same time. He made me feel wanted. And I became something you stored until you knew whether he was a better offer. Claire covered her face. I did not enjoy seeing her break down. That was another truth revenge stories often leave out. Someone can deserve consequences and still be painful to watch while receiving them. My memories did not disappear just because my trust had. Part of me still recognized the woman I had held in hospital rooms and danced with in our kitchen. But recognition was not reconciliation. "Are you with Evelyn?" she asked after a while. "No. Do you want to be?" "I don't know what either of us wants yet. She hates me. She barely speaks about you." That hurt Claire more than hatred would have. Hatred would have kept her important. Indifference placed her outside Evelyn's life. "I heard Nolan may face charges," she said. "That has nothing to do with me. You exposed him. His financial records exposed him. Would you have investigated if he hadn't been with me?" "No. But I did not move the money." She nodded slowly. "Do you regret what you did to us?" I asked. "Every day. Do you regret the affair, or do you regret that the future he promised wasn't real?" Her eyes filled, and for once she did not answer immediately. "At first, I regretted losing the future," she admitted. "Now I regret discovering I was willing to sacrifice our life for it." It was the most honest thing she had said since the divorce began. "Keep being that honest," I told her. "Not for me. For whoever you become after this." I lifted the first box and walked toward the door. Claire followed. "Graham, is there any version of the future where you forgive me?" "Probably." Hope flickered across her face, so I finished. "But forgiveness is not the same as returning." I left the house without looking back. The divorce was finalized 8 months after discovery. Claire kept the Queen and house by refinancing it and paying me my agreed share of the equity. I purchased a smaller condominium in West Seattle with a balcony facing the Sound. On clear mornings, I could see the Olympic Mountains beyond the water. The first piece of furniture I bought was a wide oak desk, not because I needed another place to work, but because I finally applied to teach an evening trial advocacy course at the University of Washington. I had postponed that goal for 9 years. Teaching paid far less than litigation, yet those 3 hours every Tuesday became the best part of my week. My students did not know the full story. They only knew I spoke often about the difference between controlling a room and controlling yourself. Professionally, my firm recovered. The settlement arrived, the case closed, and I reduced my caseload enough to stop treating exhaustion as proof of importance. I began seeing a therapist named Dr. Patel, initially because Rebecca said every angry lawyer believed he could cross-examine his own grief and usually made it worse. Therapy annoyed me for the first month. There were no exhibits, no clean admissions, no moment when the opposing argument collapsed. Healing was repetitive and humbling. Some weeks, progress meant sleeping through the night. Other weeks, it meant smelling an unfamiliar cologne in an elevator without feeling my pulse accelerate. Evelyn remained in my life, though not in the way Claire assumed. For several months, we met for coffee, exchanged occasional calls, and helped each other through depositions, settlement conferences, and the ugly practical aftermath of separation. We created a rule: no relationship decisions until both divorces were final and neither of us needed the other as an ally. That boundary protected us. It gave us space to discover whether our connection existed beyond Nolan and Claire. After my divorce was finalized, Evelyn invited me to see a small sailboat she had purchased and begun restoring in a marina near Shilshole Bay. The hull needed work, the cabin smelled of varnish, and there were blue paint streaks across her hands. "It doesn't generate revenue," she said, smiling. "Scandalous," I replied. We spent the afternoon replacing damaged trim. Nothing dramatic happened. No declaration, no revenge-fueled kiss, no instant promise that suffering had delivered us to the people we were meant to find. Before I left, Evelyn touched my hand and asked whether I wanted to have dinner the following week, not to discuss lawyers, evidence, or our former spouses, just dinner. I said yes. We dated slowly. At the time I am telling this story, we have been together for nearly a year, but we maintain separate homes and separate lives that overlap because we choose them to, not because fear or revenge pushes us together. We do not call what happened to us fate. That would give Claire and Nolan too much authorship over what came next. Nolan avoided criminal charges after reaching a restitution agreement approved through the company's legal process, but he lost Price Urban, most of his professional reputation, and the social circle built around his position. He moved to Arizona and began consulting for smaller developers. Evelyn rarely mentions him. Claire sold the house 14 months after the divorce. Losing Price Urban as a client caused a sharp decline in her business, and several nonprofit boards quietly stopped offering her contracts once the circumstances became known through Seattle's small fundraising community. I did not spread the story. Nolan's termination and the cancelled agreements created questions, and questions created answers. Claire eventually took a salaried development position at a smaller organization outside Tacoma. Melissa and Claire stopped speaking for nearly a year, each blaming the other for decisions they had made together. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they later entered family counseling. I hoped it helped them. That surprised me too. 2 years after the afternoon I came home early, I saw Claire in a bookstore near Pike Place Market. She stood in the travel section holding a guide to Vancouver Island. Her hair was shorter. She wore the old green sweater. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she gave me a cautious smile and said, "Hi, Graham." "Hi, Claire." She asked about teaching. I asked whether she was well. She said she was doing better and had been in therapy for over a year. There was no dramatic collapse in front of me, no ruined woman begging for another chance. She simply looked diminished in a quieter way, stripped of the certainty that someone else would always absorb the cost of her choices. "I heard you and Evelyn are together," she said. "We are. Are you happy?" I considered the question. "Sometimes. More often than I used to be." She nodded. "I'm glad." I believed she meant it, or at least wanted to. When we parted, I waited for satisfaction, anger, or grief. What arrived instead was indifference softened by memory. I walked out carrying the book I had purchased and forgot about the encounter before reaching my car. That was when I understood I had finally moved beyond winning. Winning happened when the confessions were recorded, the petitions filed, the money protected, and the lies exposed. Healing happened much later, in smaller moments nobody applauded, sleeping peacefully in a quiet room, teaching something I loved, trusting Evelyn without checking whether she deserved it every day, and seeing Claire without needing her to suffer. Victory and healing are different things. Victory is an event. Healing is a practice. One proves they could not destroy your future. The other gives you permission to live inside it. Before I finish, there are 5 things I learned from what happened. 1. When I found Nolan's clothing scattered through my house, restraint gave me choices that rage would have taken away. Feeling anger was human, allowing it to make legal and moral decisions for me would have turned their betrayal into my downfall. 2. Evidence mattered because both Claire and Melissa immediately tried to rename what they had done. Memories can be challenged, but photographs, invoices, dates, and a voluntary recorded confession gave the truth a structure strong enough to survive their explanations. 3. A person who helps conceal betrayal is making a choice, not standing neutrally on the sidelines. Melissa did not take Claire's vows, but every false alibi and borrowed room deepened the harm. Loyalty to family does not require enabling whatever that family member wants. 4. Evelyn and I refused to use each other as revenge partners, even when pain and closeness made that path tempting. Waiting until the divorces ended allowed whatever grew between us to belong to us rather than to the people who betrayed us. 5. consequences did not heal me. Therapy, boundaries, teaching, time, and learning to trust my own judgment did. Exposing the truth ended the deception, but rebuilding my life required work no courtroom could order. Now I want to know what you would have done at the moment I reached that bedroom door. Comment 1 if you think I was right to step back, collect evidence, and plan a controlled confrontation. Comment 2 if you would have opened the door and confronted them immediately. Comment 3 if Melissa's role felt like a second betrayal just as serious as Claire's affair. And tell me where you are listening from and what time it is there. I always find it remarkable how far one difficult story can travel. If this story stayed with you, leave a like and subscribe for more stories about betrayal, consequences, and the quieter work of starting again. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional patterns, fully rewritten in Seattle to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.